Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rosario and I like to read books. While my channel is mostly based around books, I also really enjoy playing video games. And I think I've noticed that there's quite an overlap between readers and gamers. If you like reading, there's also a lot of games that you will really like if you don't already play games. So I thought I'd put together a little list. If you like books and you like reading and the kind of like art of storytelling, I think you'd really enjoy these games. Some of them, like I've included some that are very like story driven and simple. So if you haven't really ever delved into video games as an adult, they're quite simple to get into, and some that I think will be easy to pick up if you're a bit more of a seasoned gamer, if you already play games, if you've never picked up a controller, like they might take you a second to get into them, but they're all still relatively easy. None of them are like hard games to play. Okay, so the first game that I think, if you're a reader and you love rich stories and really good storytelling, like emotional stories, I think you'll really love any of the Life is Strange games. So I've played the first Life is Strange and also Life is Strange True Colors, and they're so amazing. So they're kind of they're kind of almost like a visual novel. So there's no combat in the game. The gameplay is very much like click and point almost. So the story follows, in the first one especially, story follows Max, and she's a student at this art academy, and she kind of discovers that she has these abilities to turn back time. So you follow her as she started this new kind of academy, and one of her old childhood friends turns up, and they kind of like reconnect. And then there's certain things that start happening. There's kind of a mystery that unfolds, and you kind of just go through this story with Max, and the story is just so good. It's so emotional, so rich. There's such so you get to know the characters so well. I feel like I'm describing a book, but I'm describing a video game. That's how like similar I feel like these are. So in terms of like the controls, it's like very easy to play and pick up if you've never played a game before. Even if you do play games, it's still enjoyable to play. It's almost like a click and point. You kind of move around and you interact with objects, you talk to people, and one of the things I really like is that the decisions you make will impact the story. So there's different outcomes to the story, and different relationships with different characters will change depending on the choices you have made, which I've always find so amazing. I remember when I was younger, I used to read books where you'd have different outcomes. So you'd have two choices at the end of a chapter, and it's like, if you choose choice A, go to this page, and if you choose choice B, go to this page, and you get different outcomes for the story, which I always thought was so fun. And so I feel like when I discovered that there were games with a similar concept, it was like mind-blowing to me. I love it. So yeah, if you like anything that's any kind of fiction books with like strong characters and like really like strong and rich relationships between the characters, or something that's set in like a high school with a bit of a mystery going on about some parts of it get quite dark, maybe check out a trigger warning for it. It also has an amazing soundtrack to go along with this story. But yes, it's just so amazing. It's one of those games that's just so amazing that I don't know how to explain, other than if you love stories, you will love this. And I'd recommend Life is Strange and Life is Strange True Colors. Life is Strange True Colors follows a different character who has a different ability, but it's a similar kind of concept. Okay, so the next game that I'd recommend is Oxenfree and Oxenfree 2. These are kind of similar to Life is Strange in the way that there's no combat in these, and the controls are very simple and easy to play. You can pick it up and play with very little knowledge of gaming. So in Oxenfree, we follow a group of teenagers who are going to this local island for a kind of graduation party. However, when they get there, strange things start happening, and it seems they've kind of opened up this rift, this like ghostly rift. So this one is very much like a horror kind of thriller story, and it's also very similar to Life is Strange, where you kind of, the only really controls is you walk and you talk to people. So you get like to like build the relationships, and you get to talk to other characters a lot. You walk, you click, and you talk to characters. So you can see the relationships between these four characters who are friends. It feels a lot like it draws on lots of those things similar to Life is Strange. I think they both do this, where you kind of, it feels like you're watching a kind of like teen film, coming of age kind of story, which I really like, and it has this like feeling of nostalgia to it. I don't know, but I just really loved them. There's also multiple endings for this, so lots of the choices you make will have an impact on the way that the characters will talk to each other, and different characters will respond to you. And again, there's multiple endings for this, so depending on what you choose, different things will happen at the end of this game. I don't think I've gone back and finished everything, but I feel like I really should. Like, it is such a fun game, and I feel like once you've played it, you do want to go back and see what other options there are and what other endings can happen for these characters. So I think if you like very atmospheric horror books, kind of like almost like a bit of a coming of age, that vibe of like a kind of teen film, and where you get to see all of the different dynamics between the characters, I think you'd really enjoy this one. The next game that I'd really recommend is Skyrim. I remember when it came out and I was doing my A-levels, and all I wanted to do was not revise at all for any of my exams and study the lore of Skyrim. How obsessed I was with this game. This is like an RPG. It's set in this kind of Nordic world of Skyrim. This kind of Nordic-y, very snowy kind of area. It's all open world and you can run around everywhere you want. It's so much exploration, and you essentially make your own character. You can choose the race, you can choose what weapons you want to use, you can choose what, if you want to use magic, if you want to fight with swords, if you want to fight with like big great swords, and like all of those things. You can customize your character, everything. You get so much free reign over who you are in this world, and then you can follow multiple different plot points. There's two kind of main parts of the story. So there's one part which is about dragons. In this world, dragons are thought to kind of be a bit of a myth, or they've kind of died out, but suddenly dragons are seem to be back, and you're kind of following this whole story about what's going on with that. And there's also this story that's quite political. There's a civil war kind of going on about like the empire and then like the kind of native people of the land, and there's two different factions, and it's kind of like political struggle that's going on, which I found really interesting and fun because of, depending on which one you choose, the story is different. So if you're on the empire side, your story will be different from if you choose the kind of like rebel side. So there's also replayability of the game as well, because of you do want to experience both, and you can make a new character. People in the world will react differently to your character depending on what race you're choosing. It just feels so immersive, and like I said, the world is very open, and there's so much exploration to be done. You just get so immersed in it. So I really liked the storytelling, and I really loved the world in this. It's set in a fantasy world as well, so there's magic, there's different races of people. There's like Khajiits that are like cat people, and then there's like lizard people, and there's magic. There's different factions you can join. So you can join this kind of like dark brotherhood of assassins, or you can join the thieves guild, or you can join the kind of like companions, which is like a fighting guild, and you can do all of these things as one character. So you can join all of those factions and just experience all these different kind of storylines depending on what you want. And you can also do none of those things. You can do whatever you want in the game, kind of like you don't have to follow any one storyline. You can just go around the world exploring and not complete the main story if you want to. It's very open and very fun, very addictive as well. As for like combat, if you're like someone that hasn't really picked up games, the combat is very simple. You literally hit there's two attack buttons, you hit the attack buttons and you fight the enemies. I don't think it's too difficult. I think it's fairly simple. I know some gamers that don't like Skyrim because of this combat is a bit simple for people that do play a lot of games, but I didn't mind that. I enjoyed it for everything else. If you like high fantasy with political intrigue and like different kind of storylines going on simultaneously, if you like those kind of vibe, I think you'll really like Skyrim. And then the next one I would recommend is The Last of Us. This has also been made into a TV series by HBO, which is actually really amazing. Like, it's such a faithful adaptation of the game. I'd highly recommend that as well. In The Last of Us, it takes place in this post-apocalyptic world. A fungus has kind of made people into these like zombie-like creatures, and humanity has kind of been pushed into these small like military zones, and lots of the world is just like overtaken. In this we follow main character Joel, who is tasked with transporting a girl to this kind of underground group. He's kind of like not a mercenary, but someone that does jobs for money essentially. He is tasked with transporting this girl to the leader of this underground group, and you kind of follow this journey as he's traveling to get the girl there. And they're both kind of reluctant at first, but over this kind of thing you see their relationship grow. And I think Joel and Ellie, the main characters, are just like the thing that makes this game so amazing. And then there's also just like so many other characters that you get so attached to on this journey. Like, it's not just a smooth journey, loads of different things happen, there's so much action, so much emotion. It's just a flawless game if you ask me. The story is just so amazing. If you're a reader and you love things with action, you love post-apocalyptic, you love like father-daughter relationship, strong characters, like honestly, like, I really think you'll love this. This is such a good game. Such a good game, such amazing storytelling. Things I love about games is when you have a game that has such amazing storytelling, you get so immersed in the world because you're playing as that character. And you also have like all of the like action and the combat, and you have the music, like the soundtrack to it. It just all comes together, and it's just it's such an amazing experience. There's so much depth in the kind of like political lore of the world and what's been happening since everything kind of fell apart, and it's so in depth. There's so much going on in it. And also the scenery in this game is amazing. It's set in like this apocalyptic America, and there's just such beautiful scenery of like how nature has kind of taken over in all of these cities, and it's like huge skyscrapers that have just been taken over by nature, like greenery everywhere. It's such a beautiful game to play, just in terms of the story, the scenery, everything. The combat in this, if you don't play games, you might find it a bit hard at first, but it's not too hard. It's not I don't think it's anything crazy hard. It's just, if you don't play games, you might need to practice a bit. But I think the combat's really fun. It's very action heavy mixed with these kind of touching moments between the characters. I'd recommend if you like anything post-apocalyptic, that kind of like father-daughter relationship, anything kind of like zombie-ish horror, like human relations in post-apocalyptic worlds, and kind of like how even when the world is overrun with monsters, people will still divide, faction themselves up, and humans can be their worst enemies sometimes. And monsters aren't the only enemies. Kind of like Walking Dead. I feel like if you like The Walking Dead, you'll like this too. It's amazing, emotional. I can't recommend this game enough. Then the final game that I have is Final Fantasy XIV. I haven't actually played any of the other Final Fantasy games. I personally haven't played them because I am just addicted to Final Fantasy XIV apparently, but I will do. And I think everyone that likes Final Fantasy XIV also really likes the other Final Fantasy games. I think 7 has just been remade to like have modern graphics, which everyone really speaks very highly of. So I'll probably play that at some point. But back to what I was saying. I think if anyone knows me, they will know that I love Final Fantasy XIV. I got super into it during lockdowns. It kind of became that, my little lockdown comfort game. It's an MMORPG game, so it's online and you play in a world where there's loads of other people just around, like other players. So it's set in this fancy world called Eorzea. You get to make your own character. You can be all these different races. So in Final Fantasy, your character essentially is a bit of a chosen one. They are in this world and they start by doing like kind of these little odd jobs, and you eventually join this adventurers kind of guild in the world called the Scions, and you meet all of the characters who are in this guild with you. You go on such a journey together. There's so many different expansions. So the one thing I will say about this game is that it's very, very long and it takes you a while to get to the good stuff, but I can't explain to you the emotions that this game puts you through. It's one of those games where I think I was trying to catch up to get to the latest expansion that came out, so I feel like I maybe rushed a little bit through the story, and I wish I'd gone through a bit slower and just kind of like, savoured it a bit more. But you go through, you join this little guild, and it turns out your character is like this chosen one who's been gifted with this echo, so you're kind of like, you can kind of like sense things slightly differently, and you're kind of gifted this ability by like the kind of deity of the world, and then as you go through the story you find out more about that, and you go on all these different adventures. There's different expansions that you can buy, take you through all of this whole story. And I think the story in this is just so well crafted. Like, you can look back at the latest expansion, which has come out, concludes this like 10-year storyline that's been going on, and you can tell that the writers have put so much thought into everything that's happened, and so much happens across this kind of the whole arc of this story. I think one of the things that everyone loves is the characters, and the like good characters and the bad characters, because everything in the game isn't, you start off in this adventurers guild trying to do like the good thing. You think you're like the good guys, but every villain in the game as well, it's not everything's so black and white. There's so much grey area and everything. And the story is, I can't say too much about it. You just need to trust me that the storyline is amazing. So in terms of gameplay mechanics, this is the one that I'd say is quite hard to get into because of it is an MMO. So you play everything on a rotation, and you have to learn a rotation for every class that you play. So there's different classes, like you can be an archer, you could be a paladin, you could be a kind of like a white mage or a red mage, and they all do different things. So everything is divided up into like being a tank, a healer, or a DPS, which is essentially you're just someone that does damage constantly while the tank leads, and then the healers will heal the party. So the combat you pick a class and you play a rotation, which is kind of like different buttons you hit in a certain order that then casts different abilities, and you kind of have to look into it. If you play games but you don't play MMOs, I think even then you have to look it up still. I think if you play MMOs you'll be fine. If you're a gamer who hasn't played MMOs, you might find it a bit more tricky. Like that was me, and I hadn't really played any MMOs. So I had to kind of like look up the rotations. It took me a while to get into the swing of how you play a rotation. If you haven't played any games, like I'd say it might take you a while to learn the rotations. I think when you start, it starts quite good at teaching you different parts of your rotation, but I do think in the end you kind of have to look things up yourself. I would recommend this to people that really like fantasy books and don't mind spending a lot of time getting into the game and learning the rotations, and also having a lot of time to sync game, and the kind of story has been spanning over 10 years, so you got to put a lot of hours in to get to that end. But I think it's worth it because the story is just that amazing. It's very well constructed as well. That's why I'm putting it in here, because the story is so well crafted. Like I said, everything comes together when you get to the end. You just have to get there first. You love like fantasy and you love characters and like getting to know a group of little cast of characters where everyone's got their own little personality. I think you would love the Final Fantasy story in 14. I think if you're a beginner, it might be a bit hard to get into, or if you don't want to spend too much time on a game. I think I spent like 500 plus hours on it, so if you don't want to play it yourself, you can watch the story on YouTube or watch people play it. That's also fun. At times you have to play with other people. So in certain dungeons, you can go into like the party finder, so it'll put you in with a bunch of random people, or if you have friends playing the game, you can kind of all group up. But yes, there's like a social element to it, but the game's also done quite a bit to make it so you can play with like the NPC characters, so you can bring in the characters from the game with you, which is sometimes fun to do as well. You get to see like your favorite characters just like fighting alongside you, which is always fun. I'm obsessed with this game to the point where I went to like the official fan convention for it, which was amazing. I also think the community is really good. Like the community in other, I think, online games can be a bit toxic, but I think Final Fantasy is a bit more friendly to new people, and I'd say, there's obviously toxic people everywhere, but on the whole, I think people are very welcoming. I would highly recommend it. It's such a comfort game to me, and also the soundtrack is amazing. They have some amazing music in that game. Like, it's one of the only games that I listen to the soundtrack of. That and The Last of Us. Those are the games I would recommend to readers who like a good story and love good storytelling. I love them all. I feel like there's such a crossover between people that do enjoy those things. Let me know if you're one of those people and what your favourite games are, and let me know if you've played any of these. I really enjoyed doing this video and talking about something a little bit different. I think we just love storytelling. I think if you love storytelling, you can easily be a gamer and get into games too, because that is just what it's doing. It's telling a story. I hope you enjoyed this video, even if it's a little bit different from what I usually do on here. Let me know if there's any games you love that you think other readers will love, and I'll see you on my next one. Bye!